Hey guys, welcome to Nova Legends podcast. With me today, I got Dereck and Darryl Franklin, 2/3 of a great Franklin brothers that played at Chantilly in the in the 80s to 90s. Scored a lot of points. I think when you look at sibling scoring in the state, probably girls and boys, this family is probably right there near the top. I believe both of you guys were on the All Met team. Darryl was even, I think, Player of the Year, the Washington Post, which is that doesn't happen all the time and for a Virginia player. Both played in college, and just really glad you guys could join me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about siblings and sibling rivalries and the challenges of having siblings and also the benefits. I talked to twins lately. The Ramon and Damone Williams twins are incredible shooters at VMI. I talked to the Coyer twins. I talked to siblings like Gina and Tama Kublank, who are a year apart, and they were bitter rivals on the track. But you guys were spread out a little bit. So what are some of the benefits and challenges to having you guys, I guess you were 3 and 6 years apart, so that you didn't compete against each other and pick up probably that much. But on the other hand, you weren't able to play together on teams that could have even benefited. So why don't we talk a little bit about the benefits of that kind of gap? Darryl, you want to start?
Yeah, so I mean, as you said earlier, I was 3 years younger than Duane. So I had the benefit of being close enough in age where I could watch him play, kind of pick up things that he was doing, and then go to the park or go to the gym and practice those things. And I also got the benefit of watching him play in high school. He was on some very good basketball teams, teams that made it to the regional finals, lost in a close game to South Lakes. So I got to experience that Robinson vibe, Final Four Northern Region type atmosphere as a ninth grader. So we were close enough in the age where I could kind of follow him around without him getting too annoyed by me almost kind of trailing behind him and following him to the gym and to the park. It was a little bit different with Dereck because he was 6 years younger. So as he started to hit his stride as a basketball player, kind of in that 7th, 8th grade range time frame, I was off in college. I wasn't far away, but I wasn't able to see a lot of his games. So I was really following him, next morning in the Washington Post, Wednesday morning and Saturday morning, seeing how they did. And I was occasionally able to get up and see him play at Chantilly. But there wasn't much sibling rivalry, I don't think. I mean, I looked up to Duane, because he was the oldest brother. And again, I was fortunate enough to be able to watch him. And then with Dereck, just cheering him on, trying to, watching those scores and just, opening the paper and hoping they won, and he did well. So, I think we were always cheerleaders for each other. But, deep down inside, I'm sure we had kind of that competitive fire where we all wanted to do well and, maybe one up each other. But it never really came out, in the family setting. So.
Cool. Well, thanks, Darryl. How about you, Dereck? How'd you see that?
Yeah, I think since there's such a big gap in age, I think Duane it's 9 years and Darryl it's 6. So physically there wasn't much sibling rivalry going on. I spent a lot of my younger years being defeated at whatever it was. So whatever we played with, I was probably getting defeated at it, ping pong, video games, or whatever. So it wasn't much sibling rivalry in that sense. But I think a lot of it happened. A lot of the sibling rivalry for me are at the very least looking up to them and the things that they accomplished, both on and off the court. So like both of them made it to the state tournament. I unfortunately did not. I got close twice, made it to the regional semifinals twice, but unfortunately lost both times. But I remember thinking when I was in high school, at least my sophomore year when I made the varsity team, I was thinking Duane made it to the state tournament once, Darryl made it twice, I'm going to make it 3 times, and that was my goal. So I think a lot of the times I looked at the things that I saw them do for their respective basketball teams, and I set those as kind of goalposts of things that I also wanted to achieve and things that were possible for me to achieve and what I could actually do on the basketball court. So I don't think it wasn't something where I wanted to kind of be better than them or be a better basketball player or anything like that. But I definitely wanted to live up to the standard. I spent a lot of time being Little Franklin, that was my name. It was like Little Franklin over there, Little Franklin. So being the third one, everybody knew who I was, and they had expectations based on what my brothers had done before me. So I just kind of wanted to live up to it.
And you were probably too young to really remember Duane. You couldn't even process what was going on when Duane was playing. But Darryl was close enough, at least, because you were probably playing youth basketball. So he could probably be an inspiration to what you were trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely he could be an inspiration to what I was trying to do. And they would like the best things probably was them kind of cheering me on. And they were so far ahead of me that I looked up to them as being something that was actually probably greater than I thought I could be at the time, because they were doing such things and I just couldn't even imagine, 12, I'm still playing like rec basketball and Darryl's doing whatever he's doing as a senior, scoring 25, 30 points a game. So it was something that it was very exciting to watch them play. But then also one of the things Darryl would get on to be is you're not being aggressive enough, be more aggressive. Don't be so passive. Like people are looking to you to like spark the game and be the best player on the court. So you got to go out there and be that. Like it's kind of like people are looking for that out of you. And I sometimes tended to be a little bit more passive. So I think like him pushing me along was one of the things that was probably really good, even above seeing them actually play on the court and the things that they accomplished.
Well, I played against Duane because Duane was at UVA when I was in law school. So I got to know him a little bit. We played against each other a lot. It's as a player, he was different than you guys in that he had the same athleticism, and he reminded me a lot, especially of Dereck. But he reminded me of both of you guys. But he did not look for his offense like you guys did, and that might have been a function of the team that he was on and the system that was running. What was and Dereck, you probably don't remember as much as Darryl would. But what was Duane like as a player?
Yeah, I mean, Duane was very athletic and could score. I think it was a product of the teams he played on, where, all 5 starters could score, right? So that ball really moved around. There wasn't one person dominating the ball, but I think certainly if he was in a situation where he was on a team where he was counted on to score, he certainly had the ability to score kind of at will.
Yeah.
Like I said, as athletic as Dereck and myself, if not more. I think Dereck and Duane were also built similar. They were a little bit bigger. I was more of the skinny kid in the family. So they had a little bit more strength even when they went to the hole and could play a little bit more physical. But yeah, I mean, I think it was really a product of the Chantilly team he played on. I mean, they were loaded with talent, especially his senior year.
Yeah. Dereck, you see it the same way?
Yeah, I find Duane, he was an interesting like player. He was, I mean, for me, athletically, he was always kind of like the artist, like like he always had like a beautiful swing in baseball. And like when he played basketball, I always thought he was like really smooth. Like he was like smooth and silky, but I also feel like he necessarily wasn't as aggressive as like maybe Darryl was and I was, but like Darryl said, this probably has more to do with the team he played on. Like they moved the ball around real well, and they had a lot of players that can play. And so I remember them having a lot of parents that could play as well. So like even a lot of kids on that team, their parents could play well. So like I even think the parents beat the kids in the game one time when they used to play against the parents, and the teams I played on, our parents could not beat us probably in the back. So like it was definitely a really good team that was all around. I think they had a lot of good players. So it wasn't necessarily the opportunity to maybe dominate as much and be as aggressive. And so, it's just the way it happens sometimes. And for me, I think a lot of what I was able to do has to do with the path. Like I said, I was little Franklin, so everybody was expecting me to be good. And Darryl set the path to scoring 25 a game. So then everybody's looking like Dereck, he's probably going to have the opportunity to score 25 points a game. He's going to be looked to be the scorer and stuff like that. So, it's sometimes it's fate and sometimes it's just timing as to what your opportunities are. And I don't underplay that in what happened with my career and compared to what Duane did in his career and the opportunities he had. So
what you guys have in terms? What were your parents like in terms of sports parents? I remember seeing your parents at games, and people probably forget this, but in the western part of the county, there was just starting to be a lot of Black professionals in that part of the county. There was always historical Black neighborhoods in Chantilly and Robinson area, but the demographics were changing a little bit, and a lot of times Black parents would not put the pressure on their kids in sports as much as in the past because, you know, they wanted to focus on academics as well. What kind of focus and emphasis did your parents put on sports when you guys were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say they introduced us to sports, right? I mean, I don't want to say there was an expectation, but they pushed us to try different things and to play sports, right? So for me, it was football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. You didn't play both at the same time back then. You just focused on one during that season. But we never had pressure, at least in my opinion, to like try to be great at a sport, right? I think there were a lot of lessons learned from playing sports that we gained. But my recollection of how they handle sports was, you know, you show up on time, you work hard, you respect the coach, and you complete the season, right? If you're not having fun, you're going to complete the season. So you started it, you finished it. And then also was big about, you know, how you carry yourself, you know, on the field. You don't show people up. I mean, I remember one situation clearly when I was a little kid playing football. I mean, football was my sport as a kid growing up. And I broke loose on like a sweep around the corner and I got 5 yards away from the end zone and I turned around and I put the football back in the guy's face that was chasing me. That was the last time I ever did that, right? I heard about that when I got home. It wasn't a great job to score those touchdowns. It was lesson learned about what you do and don't do when you're on the field. So I think my biggest takeaway, you know, from that is that, you know, number one, they exposed us to different sports and encouraged us to play. And number two, they made sure we played the game the right way.
Derek, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I completely agree with it. Like I said, and like he said, I didn't feel much pressure to actually participate in sports. You know, it's something that I definitely wanted to do. As a kid, I probably had a lot of energy, so needed to get it out some way. So definitely sports would have been a good avenue. But for me, I mean, this would probably be the best question to ask to Duane, how he was introduced to sports, you know? So like, cause with me, it was just something that I was going to do next. Like, okay, I turned 6. Okay, I'm going to go play basketball as soon as I can. I'm going to go play baseball as soon as I can. And so it just seemed like it was the next thing that I would do based on the example of my brothers and what they were doing. So so I don't even remember being introduced to it. It was just always around me because they were always playing football or baseball or basketball. So
But by the time they got to you, you really had no choice. You were going to play like
it wasn't that, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the roadmap. So you just do it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a little bit about your development. So you got, who are your role models in terms of basketball, in terms of maybe in the NBA or maybe in terms of college players or even players around the Chantilly area? Who are your travel coaches and your travel teammates that you play with that you connected well with? Derek, do you want to go first this time? Oh no, we'll go Darryl first, since Darryl's the older of the group.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, kind of biggest influencers as a kid basketball-wise was Georgetown, right? That was the first time really that I got into basketball, seeing John Thompson coach and seeing those Georgetown teams in the early 80s. I've got a picture in my office, you know, Michael Jordan hitting the shot, you know, the last, you know, shot at 13 seconds left in the Superdome in New Orleans back in 1983. And kind of that's my most, the earliest kind of vivid memory of thinking I want to play basketball, right? That, you know, so in terms of coaches at a young age, I mean, my dad, he coached us, which was huge, right? As a little kid, to have your dad take out that time and spend and coach you, that was a big influence on me. I don't remember a lot of my other younger coaches, other than Russell's dad, call him Bumper, Payton. He coached me the year after. So my dad coached me in second and third grade. And then I ended up on Russell's younger brother's team, Damon and Mr. Payton, Bumper back in the day coached. And he just knew he was John Thompson. You know, he was getting kicked out of fourth grade games. He had the towel over the shoulder. So that's probably one of my most vivid memories, because that was great. You know, we all loved Georgetown. I think I had the gray and blue shoes with Hoyas on the back. But I vividly remember him strolling up and down the sidelines with the white towel on his shoulder, yelling at the referees, and getting ejected at least once or twice. But basketball-wise, again, it was Georgetown, and then yeah, I loved Isaiah Thomas. And you know, until Michael Jordan got in the league, and then you had to decide you were either a Bulls fan or a Pistons fan. And I obviously went with Michael Jordan. But from a basketball standpoint, I would say guard-wise, it was probably Isaiah Thomas was the one that I would watch the most, and then try to go to the park and do some of the stuff that I saw him do on the court.
Yeah. It's just Russell Payton was on a podcast with I guess the 88 Final Four. And he told a story about his dad. It went up to Bucknell, watch him play. And somehow his dad's on the court during warmups. And Russell was just like, wow, Dad, you just, but everyone was a good sport about it. They just knew that was Russell's dad.
That's how he's probably standing under the basket, right? Coaching the team up as they were warming up.
Yeah. I mean, it was a Division I game, it was completely out of place, but that was Russell's dad. So I don't remember that, but I wish I remember more stories like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. How about you, Dereck? Who'd you try to play with, and who were some of your teammates and coaches you had in travel?
Yeah, and so like Darryl said, like I definitely remember the support definitely from our parents and especially from my dad. Like he drove me all over the place. So I remember Duane once telling me, probably when I was getting to high school, he was saying the best thing that ever happened to you was getting on the AAU team in Alexandria. So I had pretty much grown up playing in the bubble of Chantilly, playing travel basketball and stuff like that, and playing teams mostly in the Fairfax County area. So I wasn't necessarily a tall kid, but I was strong. I was probably fairly tall for my age in the area I was playing basketball. So I generally played the 4 spot. And so I remember, I believe I was in 6th grade. I think this coach had seen me play in an AAU game for our Chantilly team. I mean, we were getting killed though. Like we were getting beat by 25 and 30, and I would probably score like 25 points, but we'd probably have 35 points. So we were, and at that time AAU was starting to get big. It wasn't like as huge as it is now, not even close, but it was starting. It was probably 92 or something like that, 90 or something. So, and his coach found me. He was like, yeah, you should come try out. And so I came and I tried out, and I remember getting to the tryout and him asking me, what position do you usually play? And I was like, yeah, usually like 4 or 5. And he just started laughing. He's like, you're a 2. He's like, you're a 2 or a point guard. And so like, I mean, we had guys on the team at that age that were probably like 6'2", 6'3", and I was probably about 5'7". So it really changed my game a lot. I went from playing around the basket to primarily playing on the perimeter. And probably at that time, because I was stronger and a little bit bigger, I didn't get to play on the perimeter very much in my travel days. So that was probably one of the biggest influence. And kids were more physical, they were faster, they were quicker. And so I also I often look to that as being a really good time, and probably one of the bigger influences in the changing of my basketball career, where my strength and my size as a young age was an advantage, but it was also a disadvantage, because at the next kind of step going to high school, I probably wasn't going to be playing around the basket. I was going to be on the perimeter. So that set me up real well. So that was Joe King, and we were the Alexandria All-Stars.
Yeah, I played against Joe.
Yeah. A lot of those guys ended up playing at TC Williams. I think they won the region in '98 that year with, I believe it was Dwayne Bryant was the coach, and Justin Moore, Dominique Wimbush, David Bridges, like Eric Short, like a lot of those guys, I played AAU with them since like 6th grade. So
yeah,
that was probably one of the bigger influences besides watching my brothers play. I already discussed that, but I remember that as being like a turning point as to how I played and what shaped my game.
Yeah, Joe went to
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Julian.
I was just gonna say Joe went to GW and then TC, so we played basketball and football against each other. He was a good dude. Yeah. Did you want to?
I was gonna say, I don't recall, us, my age group playing a lot of AAU out in Chantilly. I mean, we had the travel ball, but I really saw it pick up with Dereck. They started playing AAU. The next thing you know, he's going to Vegas and all these places for tournaments. We didn't get that same experience, but with travel ball, one other thing I do remember is probably 6th, 7th grade is, either CYA or SYA I was playing for. And there was this team from Bailey's Crossroads, right? They come in the gym and you're looking at them, they look like grown men.
Probably were.
And they kind of set the standard at an early age to say, well, if you're going to do something, this is kind of the bar. And so Greg Williams was on that team. I think he might have been dunking in 7th grade already. I don't know if you remember Walter Wright. I remember he was on that team, training threes. I'm sure there was probably, 5 or 6 other guys that went on to have great high school careers and potentially played in college. But that's probably what I remember most about travel ball is, okay, these kids are playing a different type of ball than we're playing out in Chantilly, and so it was great exposure to be able to see that and see a different brand of basketball. But I wish we had the opportunity to play some of that AAU ball at an earlier age, like Dereck and his age group did. And obviously now AAU's just taken off to a whole new level. So,
And I'm
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Derek.
Okay. Yeah. Like I remember, and it just exposed you, like Darryl said, to another level. Like I went and played in Alexandria, and a lot of those kids, like I said, stronger, more physical. It's just a different type of game. During practice, like no fouls are being called anywhere. You're just being physical, and it's like always just finished through contact. And I remember just being exposed to like even some teams in DC, and I remember like I believe it was called Washington Hospital. This guy, I believe, was a doctor at the hospital, and he put together this AAU team, and it had players like, I believe it had like Keith Bogans was on it, and I think he was from Alexandria, went to Kentucky, played in the NBA for several years, and Kevin Lyde. And I remember them telling me, yeah, you're going to guard Keith Bogans, and I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, this dude's like 6'3" already. like we're in like 6th, 7th grade, and I'm looking at this guy, he's 6'3" already. Like, how am I going to guard him? And and that ended up being something in my career where I ended up always having to guard people that were larger and taller than me. I was joking with some of my friends the other day when we were talking about some film study and what happens in film study. One of my friends is a coach, and he's talking about something he had to do in film study. And I was like, I remember one time in film study where a coach I had to guard Wally Zerbiak, and he's 6'9". And they said, Derek, you should have guarded him this way. And I'm like, dude, he's a foot taller than me. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, there's no way I'm stopping that. So, but yeah, so the AAU days, it was definitely showing me another level of basketball and another level of physicality. And it showed that you're going to have to up your game. You're going to have to work on it if you want to compete with these guys,
Yeah, AAU really changed basketball, especially in the suburbs. So when I was class of 84, so I'm 8 years older than Darryl. There might have been one AAU team. So you had to be an all-region quality player to even play AAU when I was playing it. And it got a little bit better for Darryl, and then obviously much better for Derek. But what would happen is once the guys in the county like Derek started playing with Keith Bogan and started playing with Joe King's team, it really narrowed the gap between the suburb kids and the city kids. It really, there wasn't that fear anymore, because the AAU, you saw those kids all the time. I remember when I was coaching Nova United, we would see kids in the city. It was no big deal anymore. It was a big deal when I played. I mean, it's not that we were afraid of them. They were just better. They had a more physical style of play. It was hard for us to adjust to playing city schools when we were playing. We might be a little afraid of them too, but it was just more of a style of play, and they were better than us. Yeah. So, well, anyway, let's get to the high school career. And before we get to your career, I do want to talk about one game. And I sent you guys notes. I made a mistake, and I thought it was Darryl that played against him. But one of the greatest high school games I've ever seen was the triple overtime game when Petersburg beat Chantilly. And I believe that was Duane's either junior or senior year.
Senior year.
Kenny Harris was a player that was not heavily recruited at all. And I guess his junior year, he didn't even start. His senior year, he just became this great player, and it was on even the radar of UNC and other great players. And I think he had one of the greatest single season scoring records in Virginia history. And so do you guys remember that game? Kenny, I think, scored maybe 40 that game, and it was just a great game.
Yeah, no, I remember that game. I remember sitting up in the stands at University of Richmond. Kenny just went crazy. I mean, Chantilly, I think, had the game won, and Kenny's pulling up from 20, 25 feet out and just draining threes. And just I don't know if he hit a three to put it into overtime, but then the game just kept going. And you hate to see either team lose a game like that. But Chantilly played great. They just ran up against somebody that got hot. And I think he ended up going to UNC.
He did.
Playing for UNC. I don't know if he stayed there all 4 years, but he could flat out play. Yeah.
He ended up playing. I guess I did a podcast with George Lynch, and he had played against George, and he did play at UNC. He just never really got on track at UNC, as obviously. And we could talk about selecting these mid majors versus these top 20 schools. The decisions that college prospects have to make. But let's go to the high school career, because Darryl, you had a career that's going to be different than Derek, because as we discussed before, you stepped into a team that was. You had a lot of good players, so you weren't going to be able to play your freshman year. And I believe you got the chance to play varsity your sophomore year.
Yeah.
So and that was Martino, one of these incredible coaches that Northern Virginia coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so it was great. Yeah, you're correct. My freshman year, I played freshman basketball, which I think was great for me because it did give me some confidence. Just be able to play against kids, my own age. And again, that year, you had Duane and Russell in the backcourt on varsity. So there really wasn't any opportunity to play varsity or even JV. There were solid guards on the JV team as well. But for sophomore season, they got moved up to varsity, and that was a great opportunity for me. I don't want to say it was a rebuilding year, but they lost a lot of talent from the prior year. All 5 starters graduated, I believe. But it was a good opportunity for me. I got to play with Doug Yule, which was great. Good mentor. He was a senior at the time, so it was great to play alongside somebody like him who was a true leader on the football field, on the basketball field. So that was beneficial for me in my development. And then just to get the exposure, playing basketball at the varsity level. And we played in a tough district. I think it was a Great Falls district at the time. Herndon was tough, McLean was tough, South Lakes, Madison was tough. So really got me prepared for what was to come, in my junior and senior seasons.
Yeah. And so, that was the year, I believe that was Joey Beard's sophomore year. That would have been I guess that was.
When I was a sophomore, he would have been a freshman.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And Grant was a senior.
Okay, so that was your sophomore year was Grant's senior year. I got it mixed up. So, and then your junior year, that's when you guys had arrived, and that was Martino's last year at
Chantilly. Yeah.
Chantilly. So tell us a little bit about your junior year, and also tell us a little bit about what it's like to play for Martino.
Okay, so I would say, my junior year, I kind of have to step back, and sophomore year, I think that was kind of like when me and Shane Clancy kind of really connected. Like we were of the same mindset. I saw Shane coming up through CYA and the travel basketball. I mean, Shane was always a scorer, right? He was always the best shooter, in Chantilly, whether it's CYA or travel ball. And so, it's funny. I think we connected. I don't know if it was the sophomore year or after the sophomore year. But going into our junior year, I mean, Shane and I were together every day. We would drive around and find a park where we could work on our shot. And we had a routine that we went through probably like 5 or 6 days a week. I mean, it was hundreds of shots that we shot. And that really had a big impact on my development, kind of watching Shane and how serious Shane took the game, and how hard he practiced. And the two of us just kind of kept pushing each other, right? Days where he might not want to go shoot, I call him on the phone and say, we're doing this today. And then he'd say, let's go, vice versa. Days I didn't feel like shooting, he'd give me a call and say, look, we're going. So we shot thousands of shots before that junior year. And Shane's saying was, we're going to be the best backcourt in the Northern region, right? Like Shane was probably the most confident player on our team, quiet, but confident. We'd be in games and Shane would be like, man, they can't check us, and so that was good for me to link up with Shane for a couple of reasons, because of his work ethic. I learned from him a lot of the shooting techniques and just practicing with him. But going into the junior season, I don't think there was a more connected backcourt than Shane and I, or a more connected team than our whole team. I mean, after that, we lost our last game my sophomore year. We all were saying we're going to the big house next year. The big house to us was Robinson, right? Be able to play in front of thousands of people. That was our goal from the jump for our junior year, to win the region and get to states. And so, as a team, we were connected. We didn't care who scored. We knew that we were all going to get our points if we played together. And it was all about winning. And I think Martino set that tone right. It was all about winning for Martino. If you know Martino, he knows everybody. So he knows how to connect with people. He knew how to connect with us on an individual level. He spoke to us differently based on our personalities. I would say Martino, and then we had an assistant, Tom Ferrick. Those two were, I think, probably the first two coaches that really gave me a sense that I could probably play at the next level, right? After my sophomore year, even going into my junior year, I didn't really know what was possible. But those two were probably, instrumental in convincing me that if you keep working at this, you've got an opportunity to play at the next level. But that junior season was fantastic. I mean, again, like I said, being so aligned with your teammates, no arguing, nobody worried about who scores as many points. We just knew what the goal was, and that was to win the region and get to states. So a lot of great memories, coming out of that season.
So that was Shane was a senior that year, or was he a junior also that year?
But Shane was a year older than me. So Shane was a senior my junior year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what Shane does, and I love Shane because Shane loves to argue. Like whenever on the Facebook group, he'll take a strong stand on anything. But one thing we talked about was we went down. You guys went down, and this was one. First of all, I agree with you. Your team was really connected. You guys had great chemistry, fun to watch, great pull-up jumpers. You and Shane both could just pull up on a dime. It was a fun team. You guys defended real well. Martino put on a show on the sidelines. But then
every game
put on a show. I used to referee. I know about that show. But you guys go down to state, and one of the funniest state tournaments I've ever seen. One of the reasons why was this team Bayside, their crowd was insane. They would sing these crazy songs throughout the game. They would bring their no matter what the weather was, they bring hat, coat, and take your hat and your coat, and they would bring these hat and coats, and they sing the song after the game was out of hand. Take your hat, your coat, and leave. I mean, a whole crowd was singing. I mean, it was a great team, and Bayside had a great story because it was at the time the poor section of Virginia Beach. They never had a winning team in the school history. They hired this coach, Ron something, I can't think of his last name, but he was promoted from the middle school team. His first year, he had the first winning record in school history. The next year was the year they beat you guys in the quarterfinals. Shane says you guys were all very sick that game, and that look, they're a great. Shane thinks they're a great team. He wasn't making excuses, but his thing was you guys were very sick that day. Is that true, Darryl?
Yeah, Shane was definitely sick. I don't even recall if Shane got a chance to play. I don't know if it was a stomach bug or what. He might have tried to. Knowing Shane, he probably tried to play, but really couldn't. So Shane was definitely sick.
Right.
I think one of our other stars, I believe Jimmy Teller, who's our 4, I think he was sick as well. So those two were definitely sick. I don't recall being sick before the game. After the game, I was a little bit sick after we got beat by 30. But yeah, Shane was definitely sick. Shane wasn't at 100% or even 50%. Same with Jimmy Teller. Tim was fine. And then the other starter, Ted Baker, I don't recall him being sick as well. But say 2 out of the 5 starters were definitely sick. But that was a good team. They had Mario Mullins, who ultimately went on to ODU and had a great career. And then I think their other big man was like an All-American defensive end on the football team.
Ronell Williams.
Ronell Williams, something like that. Yeah, so that was a good team.
It was a good team, physical team.
Yeah,
well coached.
yeah. So I don't know if the outcome would have been different, but I do know the game would have been much more competitive than it was.
Well, you got to bring your big guns to the big dance. So, the next year, talk a little bit about changing coach. So Jim Smith comes over from McLean, and he ends up having a great career at Chantilly, Coach Dereck as well. Talk a little bit about the transition. Was it disappointing for you for Martino to leave because he has a connection with the players? I mean, their playing styles, the way they coach in terms of the style of play are very similar, but I think they're very different types of characters.
Yeah, they're definitely different characters. I would say I wasn't surprised that Martino left. I knew he was going to have some opportunities, and go to school like a Lake Braddock with that big student population, the history that they've had in sports there. It didn't surprise me that when he had that opportunity, he took it. So disappointed in the sense that, it was hard to make a change, your last year of high school. And then also it was, we only had me and Keith Bond were the only 2 people coming back from the team. So it wasn't just losing your coach, it was losing your whole team, your friends that you played with for a couple of years, everybody's gone, right? And so kind of feel like you were on an island. And at that point, a lot of people thought Stan Meadows, who was the assistant coach, thought that he was going to get the job. And so there was some tension there, when they announced Coach Smith was going to get the job and Mr. Meadows wasn't. I think there was even a sit-in, at the school protesting the decision not to give Coach Meadows the job. If I recall correctly, I think Coach Smith was already at the school. So I remember, I think, being with Coach Smith and maybe even Coach Meadows during the sit-in, just watching it. So yeah, I mean, it was difficult adjustment again, whole new team, whole new coach. And Coach Smith came in. Coach Smith is much more direct in terms of what he needs from you and what he expects. They both get there same way, but they both get to the same point, but different ways. And I'll give you an example, like with Martino, regional final game, my junior year, playing West Springfield, and I'm terrible in the first half. Like some people probably thought I was betting on the game trying to throw it. That's how bad I felt I played it. So he knew I was struggling. Martino knew I was struggling and came in the locker room, got my head down. He's like, Darryl, there's good news, man. I'm looking at him like, what is the good news? He's like, you can't play any worse. It can only get better, right? So that was kind of Martino's approach, whereas Coach Smith was more direct, and he would just tell you, how he felt and what he needed from you. But I enjoyed playing for both. Like you said, they both had the same mentality in terms of winning. They just go about it differently. And, I'm forever grateful to Coach Smith because he, when he came in, I told him what I wanted to do, and that was to win the district again, and that was to win the region again, which a lot of people probably thought we were crazy. But we had set that expectation for us, me, Jimmy Teller, Shane, Tim. That was the expectation that we had, when we put on that jersey is that, we're here to win and we believe we can win the region. And so I'm grateful for Coach Smith. I mean, he could have treated this as a rebuilding year. I'm here to get my program running now. But he bought into exactly what we wanted to do. And as you know, we went on to do great things that year.
Well, before we get to the state tournament, I want to bring Dereck in on Coach Smith. So and we're gonna get to Dereck, your career. But what are your thoughts on Coach Smith? Do you view him the same way? And by the time you played for him, he was a more experienced coach because I guess Darryl probably got him in his third or fourth year of coaching or so. And
I knew he was having playing, but I didn't know how long he had coached. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he got the head job on 87, 88 probably, maybe. So Dereck, what did you think about playing for Coach Smith?
Like, I didn't play for Martino, but I mean, I definitely knew a lot about his personality going to Chantilly basketball camps and stuff like that. So, I mean, growing up, I had looked forward to playing for Coach Martino because both of my brothers had, but playing for Coach Smith, they're definitely very different. Coach Smith is not quite as like outgoing and things like that. But one thing I definitely remember from Coach Smith is he's very competitive. And sometimes it's like one time I remember playing pickup basketball with him, and Coach Smith, like I never really thought of him as a strong person. Like I didn't really. And then we were playing pickup basketball one time, and it got close, and he started to get competitive. And I think I was guarding him, and I was just like, man, this guy is really strong. Because like once he started to get that competitive juices going, I was like, man, this guy's really strong. And I'd see him in the weight room. And how much weight he could lift, I was always just amazed. And there was always seemed to be like this undergoing competitive fire in him that a lot of times he subdued, but there were some times where I saw it. And he was a very good coach, and and sometimes I caught him in moments where he took losses very hard. And I think that's where I got the feeling like he's actually really competitive. Although a lot of times on the surface, he remained a lot calmer than maybe Martino did on the sidelines, where he would remain really calm, but he definitely had a competitive fire inside of him that I don't know. I was never coached by Martino, so I didn't really see it up close. I know Martino was very like theatrical, and he'd do his show on the bench, and he'd be sometimes very fun to watch, but you didn't necessarily get that from Coach Smith. But playing for him, he was very competitive, and he took things sometimes to heart. Losses that were just very hard for him to bear. And I imagine he has a lot of grudges against some coaches too that maybe he won't share, but they exist because he wanted to beat them so bad, So yeah, I had a great time playing for him, and I'm very fortunate for the time we were able to spend together and playing for him. I look at it like very lovingly, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah, I did a
Fine
podcast.
that you mentioned the weight room because I forgot all about that. He went hard in the weight room, Coach Smith. I mean, he was
Great.
intense. 250 pounds on the dumbbell. I don't know what he had, but we used to just all stay out of his way when he was in the weight room.
Oh yeah, I remember on the bench one time he just kept putting 45 plates on it. I was like, when is he gonna stop putting 45 plates on there?
Exactly.
45 plate, 225, 10 times. 45 plate, 315, 10 times. And he just kept adding 45s on there. I was like, man, I did not realize how strong he was. But yeah, he was something else.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Coach Smith. I don't know if you guys saw. I'll share it with you if you haven't. But he did talk very well about you guys, of course. But talk about competitor. He caught 55 passes for Stewart in one season, and he was a division. He's Division III end. I think he was all little college, small college All-American in football. He was a tough guy. So, but anyway, let's get back to Darryl's senior season. I know when I talked to the South Lakes guys, I had a podcast of 6 of them. They said the rivalry with Chantilly was bitter. Like the Herndon rivalry was more of a friendly rivalry, which I always thought it was the other way around. I thought the rivalry was more bitter with Herndon. So I believe you beat Chantilly in the regional final that year, Darryl, your senior year, or either you lost to them or you beat them, and then you played one of the greatest teams I've ever seen play, high school teams, Patrick Henry team, not the one with George Lynch and those guys, but the one with Jonas Callis, Kurt Staples, Troy Mans, that team. So you ran into another buzzsaw. So talk a little bit about the South Lakes rivalry, and then about the state tournament.
Yes, I don't remember it being a bitter rivalry, but it definitely was a rivalry. I mean, we wanted to win, didn't want to lose to South Lakes. Herndon was intense too. Herndon was more of the atmosphere at Herndon, a smaller gym. People are packed in. Their fans were a little crazy. Our fans were crazy. So those were great games as well. But the South Lakes games were the ones we looked forward to, because we knew we were going to get up and down the court and run and let the ball fly. And so my junior year, we beat them in the semifinals in the region, and then played West Springfield in the finals. But that was a talented team. I mean, you had Theron. Had and Theron were shooting from the hash mark back then, right? They were pulling up from anywhere, and we weren't used to that. But I think that year we had better chemistry. I keep going back to the chemistry. We definitely had better chemistry than they did. I mean, it was there were times at my junior year where like Tim and I or Shane and I, we would look at each other once they started fighting, with each other. The South Lakes team arguing, about who had the ball and who was getting the shots. We knew we had them at that point. But that was definitely a talented team. And so those games are great. I mean, you're talking thousands of people in that South Lakes gym and the Chantilly gym when we got together. But I always had respect for those guys, just the level of talent that they had. Obviously, respect for Coach Bird and the way he coached and he managed, those talented teams. My senior year, they had Joey, Quinn. The guys just kept coming. Troy, Lonsdale. They had Tony Curry. They had a guard that it might have been Mike Sumney, or they had a guard that was good too. That was talented. Yeah, I'm not sure what ended up happening to him, but he was talented as well. The only time we beat them that year was in the district semifinals, and then we went on to win the district. And then we lost to them in the regional finals. I think we were up 14 in the fourth quarter, and they got hot. Like South Lakes run, right? Before you know it, they scored 12 straight points in a minute and a half, and that's what happened to us. And so, but it was a great game. I still remember some of those games with South Lakes, but we didn't hate the guys or anything. But we wanted to beat them bad. That was the team we wanted to beat.
In the Patrick Henry game, do you remember that team? Do you remember Kurt Staples? Do you remember that game? I think that was
absolutely. Yeah,
that was a UVA.
absolutely.
It was at UVA, wasn't it, that game?
No, it was at Lord Bodytot High School. I think then that was the first round. I think the semifinals then moved to UVA.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean that was a loaded team. I was surprised that was a public school team. And the amount of talent that they had, right? You had Troy, who went to George Mason and then ended up at Tech. Curtis Staples obviously went to UVA and did big things. Tim Basham was the 3 who went to ECU, and we, Tim and I got to play against for 4 years. And then Jonas went to VCU. And then the 5th starter went and played at Lynchburg with Chavis Till, who was my high school teammate, right? So all 5 of their starters played in college. The talent level was ridiculous. They jumped on us from the get-go, and it really wasn't much of a game. But that's probably one of the few teams that I played in high school that I would say if we played them 10 times, they probably beat us 10 times.
I asked George Lynch whether he thought his team was better than that team, because George's team had they had Curtis Blair, played at Richmond. They had Percy Covington played at VMI, both good college careers, and they had Russell Turner, he's a current coach at UC Irvine, and he had a good career at Hampton Sydney. And they had a guy named Melvin Davis, unfortunately passed away, very young. But that team was great. George thinks they could have beat him because they had the size, but I think it would have been a great game. But anyway, Dereck, why don't we fast forward to your career, and then before we go to college. Unlike Darryl, they're going to throw you into the deep end your freshman year. So your freshman year, you're playing varsity, and I remember you had a productive freshman year.
Actually, I didn't play varsity my freshman year.
Is that right?
I
Okay.
Yeah, I did play. I was pulled up for various games and stuff like that, but I didn't actually play varsity my freshman year. I imagine if you would have asked me at the time, I would have told you I could have, but no, they didn't. They didn't bring me up. Yeah, I played JV my freshman year, and then my sophomore year I actually played. Was my first year on varsity, and I think Darryl started his um sophomore year. I didn't actually start. I started on the bench, which
Oh,
um again I was kind of upset about. But like it was just something at the time where they had a lot of seniors on the team. And so I think we were starting four seniors and a junior, Mike Desmond, which was still one of my close friends. He coaches at South Lakes now.
you're doing a great job.
So yeah, and so like I think yeah, that's kind of how it started. It started in that type of situation. And I it's interesting when I look back, you would think that with my brothers coming through Chantilly that I kind of would have had an easy path, but I don't know if it's something that was in my mind, but I always felt like I always had to prove myself still. And I think they did that on purpose. I think the coaches kind of did that on purpose, where coming into JV, like I remember summer league, I didn't play very much on the summer league team, and so just make sure that, and I don't know if it wasn't like make sure he knows his place or anything like that, but just make sure he knows that it's just not going to be easy, and he's not going to just get to start on the JV summer league team. And so I kind of had to work my way into it. My freshman year on the JV team. And I came up a few varsity games, probably didn't play very much, but I remember my sophomore year was the year where I was disappointed that I wasn't starting, and maybe because Darryl started from the beginning of his sophomore year, and I remember watching him play, and I felt like I could do the same thing. But it was one of those things where I guess Coach Smith was like, "I'm not going to just give it to you," and so I remember there being a couple practices where it got very really competitive, and there's kind of a scandalous practice, to say the least, where the starting team wasn't practicing very well, and we were scrimmaging, and the backup five, which was actually pretty good, was beating them, and we would play like quarter scrimmages, and we were beating them, and I think we had beat them, or at least come close to beating them in two of the two quarters. And so Coach Smith goes and he's like, "Yeah, so this quarter we're going to scrimmage one more quarter," and he's like, "The winner of this quarter starts the next game." And I mean, my ears went up. And so like I mean, like I was in it. And I remember us getting up on them by about like 10 points with 3 minutes to go. And then all of a sudden we're calling fouls and shooting free throws. And so like the starting team, I think they made 10 free throws in the last 3 minutes. And it was just like foul after foul. And we were joking about in the locker room, Coach Smith started cheating because like it was like foul after foul after foul. He was like, "Nah, you guys aren't gonna start the next game." Coach Smith would probably tell it differently, but that's the way I remember it. And so like, but like my sophomore year, I think I started probably, I think it was the W.T. Woodson game. I think I had 12 points in the fourth quarter. I had like a steal that put us like that was, I think it was the last point that we scored that put us up with like 14 seconds to go. I stole the ball and I made a layup. And I think after that I was starting. And that team was a pretty good team. And I don't know if any of my teams were probably better than Darryl and Duane's best teams, but I played on some pretty good teams that year we made it to the regional semifinals. We played against Jeb Stewart, and Byron Hall decided to have himself a half. And I think he scored like 23, 25 points in the second half of that game. We were up 13 at half, and I think we ended up losing by 13. He kind of went off. We put probably our best athlete and maybe one of the best athletes to ever go to Chantilly, Balju, on him. And Balju, I mean, he played at Penn State, played football, Green Bay. I think he was at the Arizona Cardinals in St. Louis, and just couldn't stay in front of him. I mean, he was giving us a little bit of everything that game. So we ended up losing the regional semifinals that year. But it's something that I look back and it's just a pleasure to have like all those years playing with those guys. And our junior year, heartbreak loss against Coach Martino, Lake Braddock. We played them in the first round of the regional semifinals. We were probably one of the favorites to at least make it to the semifinals, if not the regional finals. But we ended up losing to them on a last second call. I forgot what the guard's name was, but I was guarding him, and he went up for a jump shot. I blocked it, and the ref came in, called a foul. He hits both free throws, and they ended up beating us by 1. And it's in. And then looking at my senior year, we make it to the regional semifinals again, and this time it was West Potomac. And it's funny. Like I always do these things in my head where I look at things and I make relationships. I think Darryl, you beat West Potomac in the regional semifinals your senior year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was thinking the same.
Stacey Jackson, I think was that team. But
Stacey Harris.
Stacey
Harris.
Yeah. Sorry, Derek.
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing in my head. It's like, okay, like I'm going to win. Like we're going to win this game. We're going to beat them. And then we ended up losing. I believe we lost by like 20. It was a pretty substantial loss. And I look back on that time and like I had all these goals and I had all these things and I worked real hard to try to achieve them. But sometimes in life things don't quite work out the way you want them to, and you can put all the work in and sometimes you're just not fortunate. But I look back on those days and I'm just very happy that I was able the opportunity to work towards something and actually see the results. And I look back on it fondly, even though I didn't achieve all the goals that I wanted to. I look back on that time really fondly.
I talked to Bob McKeag about that. Coach McKeag was my coach in high school at Robinson. And to me, one of the funniest guys I've ever met. The guy just makes me laugh. And I'm sure you got some funny McKeag Smith stories, because I can only imagine those two strong personalities working together. One thing he said that I didn't know is Matt played at Hampton City Division III school. He said the rest of the starting lineup was all Division I, at least one of those years. So you guys had a lot of talent on that team.
Yeah. So it was me. Matt Collins was probably the other prominent senior on that team. I don't think we had a lot of seniors on that team that played a lot of minutes. We had some underclassmen that were really good. So yeah, I think Matt Collins. I want to say he went to play basketball at a military academy. I'm not sure if it was Air Force, but he played at one of the academies, I believe. So he played Division I. And then Kwame Afori was the other guard, but he was a junior, and I believe he played at Navy.
Yeah,
he played at the Naval Academy. Really good guard, like some of the best handles I've ever seen in my entire life, and
good defender
really
too.
And great defender as well. Yeah, and he went on to play Division I, and like you were mentioning, Matt McKeag, his son, went on to play, I believe Hampton Sydney, I believe is where he went, or something like that. So yeah, we had some talent on that team. We had some people that played Division I, and sometimes also it's a timing thing. Like if me and Matt McKeag were 1 year younger and we're all seniors, that team's probably something that's much more formidable. So it's sometimes it comes down to timing, sometimes it comes down to different things, and so it's one of those things that just didn't quite work out, and it wasn't a great night for me that senior year. Like I believe I had 8 points, and that's probably the lowest I'd scored since my sophomore year, like playing at Chantilly, So but that team definitely had some talent, it definitely had some talent, but unfortunately for us, I think some of the talent wasn't yet senior class. It makes that 1 year makes a big difference, and I think just your confidence. I think Matt and Kwame as juniors, they didn't get much playing time as sophomores because we had pretty good teams throughout my entire high school career. So they came in as juniors, that 1 year can make a difference, especially for your confidence and the confidence you have to do certain things. I think they could have been much more offensive forces their junior year, but I think it was just some time coming for them. And the next year, they were actually pretty good the next year as well. So I think sometimes it just comes down to timing, I think, for that team especially.
West Potomac was a very gritty team. They had Willie Pyle, they had Carlton Phelps, they had Tyree Harris, Carlos Jones. I'm missing the big guy, white dude, but it was really
Carlos Jones. It wasn't Carlos Jones. It was Corin Turner, I think.
It was Corin Turner.
Carlos Jones played at Hayfield.
Well, he transferred. Okay, you're right. He had transferred.
He transferred. Right. Yeah, so that senior year, he had transferred to Hayfield.
That's right.
I played on AAU with Corin Turner, Carlos Jones, and then, like I mentioned before, like a lot of the guys, just about everybody on the TC Williams team was my AAU team.
Yeah.
So they beat us that year as well, and it was one of those things where I just remember it was like, man, this is going to be hard for us because I know all those guys can play. Like from that TC Williams team, the starting five, I knew they could all play. So very, very good talent, a lot of athleticism, very physical, just like the West Potomac team, very physical.
Yeah. Well, look, the high school's over. You guys had great careers, scored a lot of points. Probably didn't get quite as far as you wanted to, but you got pretty far. Let's go with Darryl first. Talk about the decision to go to American University, and also just talk about generally this mid-majors versus top 20 type schools. What are the benefits? And obviously you want to play, but you don't want to limit yourself. Obviously, these decisions are also different now because you can transfer at the drop of a hat now. But why don't you talk a little bit about your decision to go to American?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there was a couple of factors that played in. Number one is none of the top 20 schools were recruiting me. So we can cross those off the list. The second was I did want to play locally. If I had my choice, I would love to play at Georgetown, Maryland, or UVA. Those kinds of three schools, like the dream schools for me. But as a 5'11" guard, maybe 160, that probably was, that wasn't in the cards. And so I was aware of American since middle school because Coach Ed Tapscott was the coach at American when I was in middle school. And he actually came to Rocky Run, our middle school, and spoke to my class. I'm not sure why. And then, we used to go to the Georgetown basketball camp every summer. I think I did like 3 straight summers. And there's a guy, Frank Ross, that was a standout at American. And he was one of the counselors there. And so I knew he was at American. And I remember Ed Tapscott come to speak to our class. And I would watch, Frank Ross at night. They'd play pickup games, the Georgetown guys, and Frank Ross would be in there playing with these Georgetown guys. And, he's giving them buckets, right? So I'm like, man, this kid can play. He goes to American University, and I know Coach Tapscott. So I knew a little bit about American University back in middle school. And then I bonded with the coaching staff. I mean, Darryl Brooks was probably the one that I talked to most at the time. He was an assistant coach. I think he might be coaching Bowie State. Now he's coaching somewhere in Maryland, I believe. And then Coach Knoche, you had Gordon Austin, and you got Bruce Kelly. Bruce Kelly's been at Bullis, I think, for probably 15 years now, coaching at Bullis. And so really kind of, had a good connection with that coaching staff. And then you had Tim, one of my best friends, is playing at American University. So to have the opportunity to, leave high school and then play with one of your best friends for, another 3 years, college basketball, I think all of those factors really played in. And then the last one was I liked the conference. I liked the Colonial Athletic Conference that we were in at the time. I thought it was a very, competitive conference. And so I was excited to be able to play schools like George Mason, JMU, ODU, schools in the area where, had friends from high school that were going to those schools. So then I think the last thing I'll say is that, I had an opportunity to compete for a starting job, coming in as a freshman.
Hey, Darryl, was Tim Fudd already there, or was he younger than you?
Yeah, Tim was already there. So Tim was a senior when I was a junior in high school. So Tim was 1 year ahead of me. We ended up graduating at the same time because he fractured his kneecap and then he had to redshirt his junior year. So we graduated from American at the same time.
So
one thing what I would say about the recruiting process that always just shocked me was, at least at that time and period, in that late 80s, early 90s, how many players George Mason allowed to leave the area that ended up going to kind of mid-majors elsewhere, right? Like Tim didn't get recruited by Mason. I didn't get recruited by Mason. I don't know if, the likes like Stacey Harris and those guys that, went to college at Charleston, if they got recruited by Mason. But there was a lot of talent in the area that I think could have really shaped George Mason at that time, had they focused on the talent in the Northern Virginia area. That just always surprised me.
Yeah, Jim Lewis said to me, Coach Lewis was at South Lakes and was a girls coach at George Mason. He said sometimes you don't recruit at home because you figure they want to go somewhere else. So you're not wasting your time. And I don't know, I think it's so much easier to go down the street and try to build that relationship than it would be to go to, Baltimore, wherever else they end up going to get players. So Dereck, you end up going to Boston U, and I just talked to Joey Beard last week, and Joey went there. You were getting started when Joey had already graduated, and you're playing for Dennis Wolf, who Joey said used colorful language at times. And I knew Coach Wolf because he was at UVA when I was there. We used to play pickup some. Good player, solid, real crafty player himself. So talk about choosing Boston.
It's funny. I can barely remember choosing which college I was going to. Like, I don't even remember the recruiting process starting out. I just kind of really like to play basketball. I think probably once I saw Darryl go to play college basketball, I kind of understood that it was possibly a thing that I could do. And I remember watching it on TV, watching college basketball on TV, but I don't think I ever really anticipated and was in anticipation of actually going to college and playing. But I do remember kind of when I started to get attention is I think it was going into my sophomore year. I went to a basketball camp that one of the coaches at our school would take some of the kids, Coach Wayne. It's called Blue Chip Exposure Camp in Kentucky, I believe it was. And so we went to some small school in Kentucky and I played there. And, I was just kind of playing. I was like, all right, yeah, it's another basketball camp. I'll go play at this one. I think before that I had gone to, of course, some American overnight camps and stuff like that. And so I went there. And I ended up being like the best underclassman. So I got award for the best underclassman at that camp. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. These are peak kids from all over the place. And so I'm getting some like recognition as being somebody that's a good basketball player, not only in the Northern Virginia area. And then after that year, I remember getting invited to the Nike basketball camp. So I got invited there and I went and played there my junior year. And so then I was like, yeah, this is probably something that, is something that's definitely an opportunity for me to play college basketball, getting all this exposure. And so I remember getting calls from Boston University and going up there for a visit. And like you said, Joey was there, so I knew him. Billy Bill was there, so he was also from this area. So they were recruiting from Northern Virginia, especially. So Billy Bill was already there. So I think having that familiarity of people that I've seen play and people that I didn't really know, but I had seen play and that came from the area, I think that had a big impact on what I wanted to do. And also, I think unlike Darryl, I don't think I wanted to play in the area. I think I wanted to get out a little bit, go experience a new area, live in a different area. And so the city of Boston, it was a really great place to live. And I really liked kind of the atmosphere there, at least on campus. And just kind of the oldness of Boston. I really appreciated that. Because it was just something new to what you get in Northern Virginia. Like the cities are just kind of structured a lot differently and they're just older. And so I really liked that. But the thing I couldn't get over was the cold. Like it was just bitterly cold and windy. And so like that was something that probably I didn't really think of. I didn't know it got that cold in
You missed that
Boston.
memo.
Yeah, exactly. I missed that memo, So I think when I went there for my visit, it was probably towards the end of the basketball season. So it wasn't quite as bitterly cold as it can get down there. But yeah, I think, it's one of those things where going to play for a mid-major is probably a really good opportunity for a lot of players coming out of the northern region. And it's probably better to be sixth man, seventh man your freshman year, maybe eight, coming to a mid-major than not being sure what your future holds if you go to one of these Power 5 conference schools or something like that. It's something like if you have aspirations for the next level, it's kind of like my opinion. If you can play, like they're going to find you. Like if you keep your head down and you work on your game and you stick to those things, like if you can make it, you're not going to not have an opportunity because of where you went to school. And I think by the time I got to college and that started to really become true. I think it's absolutely true now, but I think even when I was coming up, like it was something that you didn't necessarily have to worry about as much as maybe before, where you had to try to get exposure and you had to try to, hopefully your coach was talking to people and he had connections with coaches and can get your name out there. And so, and like Darryl said, for my AAU team, I was traveling around to different places. So I feel like the coaches that seen me and going to a mid-major was probably the best opportunity. And I would hope to think that even if one of these Power 5 conference teams had called me, I would have had the foresight to say, it's going to be a much harder road to getting playing time going to one of those schools where it may be a possibility, but all likelihood, it's going to be a much harder road to starting and to getting significant playing time if you go that route than if you go to one of these mid-major schools where you may have the opportunity to start your first year there. So, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity. And, like I said, you work hard, you play hard, you have a good attitude. And generally coaches, they're going to find you and they're going to give you opportunity, I think.
Well, let's stick with you on this one, Dereck. You had a good career there. You first year there, you averaged 7.5 points a game, which is very respectable for a freshman. You did about the same your sophomore year, so it was going well. So, but at some point you decided to come home. And that was basically because of the weather, you think?
Well, I mean, I don't. So like, it's one of those situations where I think you don't. I mean, I don't want to get like too political into it, and I don't want to say like everything that happened there, but it's sometimes you make a decision and you're there and you're in it, and sometimes, but we didn't win a lot there, that's for sure. Like we didn't win a lot of games. I think that started to put a lot of pressure on the program and a lot of the players there. They had been successful before, like the year before Joey left. I think they had a guy named Tunji Awajobi.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, a really good athlete, really strong. He was probably about 6'7" inside. And so they had him, and then they went straight to Joey Beard and then had another significant season. And then after that, we didn't really have a player of that stature that was 6'7", 6'9", athletic, could probably even play guard maybe if they had to. So it was much harder seasons after that. And I think that took a toll, and I think there was a lot of expectations that maybe caused a lot of stress and a lot of other opportunities that especially Coach Dennis Wolf was looking at outside of Boston University and trying to get that to happen. So there was things that just kind of happened, and you never imagine that you'll be in that situation where you feel like you don't belong somewhere anymore. And I think that's kind of the way I felt. I didn't feel like the environment was really good for me. And I didn't feel like it was a place that I could grow anymore as a basketball player, as a person, And I had a pretty good support system there. So one of my assistant coaches was Orlando Vandross. He's actually one of the assistant coaches at UVA right now. And so he was there and he was mentoring me and trying to pick me up. And I actually talked to him recently. He's like, yeah, you taught me something that year. He's like, when you talk to a player and they say they don't look like they're okay, but they keep telling you they're okay, he's like, they're probably not okay. And he's like, I learned that from you. He's like, I probably should have paid more attention to you and how you were feeling and the things you were going through at that point in time. So, and it's one of those things where a coach, like Joey said, a lot of colorful language, and a lot of times that's okay when you're winning, but then when you're losing and you have all that, it kind of bears on the morale of the team and stuff like that. So I think the situation for me, it just wasn't a fit anymore, and it just didn't feel like it was beneficial to me to stay there. So I ended up leaving there and didn't really have a plan on what I was going to do next. I really came home and I was just like, okay, I'm home now. And then like I almost don't even think I wanted to play basketball anymore at that point. But I was like, and I was thinking about taking a semester off, but my dad was like, nope. He's like, you're going right back to school. So I was like, I need to find somewhere to go to school. So I went to George Mason. And then I remember going in to talk to Coach Larry Nega at the time at the prospect of possibly like walking on. Because I wasn't really looking for even getting another scholarship or playing, but I was like, I'm here. I knew Rob Anderson. I played Nova United with him our senior year. So I knew him and he was there and he was like, oh, you should just come and play. So I went to talk to Coach Larry Nega and he's like, I remember one interesting thing he told me in that interview. He was like, yeah, I've heard that you're a locker room lawyer. And I was like, what is a locker room lawyer? And he was like, and he's like, do you know what that is? I was like, no. And he's like, you're somebody that can, it's locker room lawyer is somebody that can cause dissension in the locker room by talking and politicking and stuff like that. And I remember being really surprised to hear that. And I think there was also an aspect of me after I heard that is like, I wanted to prove that that's just not me. I'm definitely not that person. But the time at George Mason was great, man. It was, and like, winning brings a totally different environment. And so at George Mason, we had good years. We were winning, very good players coming through there, like George Evans, Draymond, Lamar Butler, Rob Anderson, John Larinaga, like all those guys, really good players. Terrence Nixon, most of them from this area, Oxon Hill, Maryland, Northern Virginia, a lot of them from this area. So it was a really good camaraderie, and I really look fondly on those years because I just, it was what the experience could be. And I wasn't playing as much as I was playing at Boston University, but I was having much more fun, and I was enjoying my time there, and I just felt like I belonged more. Like this was the type of environment. And Larinaga, tough coach, really steeped in fundamentals. Like we worked on fundamentals a lot, and he was very hard on us, but he was also somebody that kind of let you explore. His offense wasn't very constricting, and he let you explore, and he let you try things out, and then he might tell you, maybe that's not for you. Maybe you can do this and this and this, and these are the aspects where you can be successful. And he was very motivational. He'd bring us books, and he's talk about the books he's read, and a lot of philosophical things on how to look at the game, how to look at competition. So that was a very good experience, and I'm glad I had it. And maybe I had to go through the Boston University experience to kind of appreciate what the true like love of the game, and being around people and having that atmosphere of almost like a family. And so I ended up getting that at George Mason. And so it's my basketball career is not quite as stable as Darryl's was, but and especially in college, but I still look back on it fondly, and I learned a lot of lessons from it. So,
well, just real quickly, did you consider playing baseball for George Mason? And also, do you think if you would have gone to George Mason from the beginning, you would have had a better? You think you would have had a better basketball? You would have played more if you would have started off at George Mason?
I don't think I would have played more my freshman year if I'd have gone to George Mason. I can't remember what was going on there at the time. I believe Darryl asked me if I wanted to be in the area, because I don't know. Darryl, was Bill Courtney there at the time when I was in '98?
I don't know if he was there then or if he came.
Who was there? Because
actually, Bill was there. Bill was there.
I think you asked me if I would think about. Yeah, I think you asked me if I would think about going to George Mason, and I don't even know what the program was at that time. But I think I had my heart set on actually going away somewhere. And maybe things would have been different if I had chosen George Mason from the get-go, and maybe it would have been a kind of different experience. But I don't have a real good feel on, and that might have been Larinaga's first year. I don't know. His run at Bowling Green, I can't remember if that was 97 or 96 or something like that. But yeah, so I don't remember if that was his first year, what would have been my freshman year in college. So but yeah, I remember Darryl asking me if I was considering something like George Mason or even American, something local. But I think I'd had my heart set on kind of exploring a new area and getting out of kind of the Northern Virginia area.
Yeah, we can't play the what if game anyway, So, so Darryl, you go to American University. Let's go back in time again, and you're playing with your high school teammate, Tim Fudd. And it's interesting about Tim is that I never thought Tim would be a Division I post player, or 4-5, or maybe he was a 3-4, whatever he was. But he ended up having a great career at American. I always thought he was like one of these crafty guys that just outworked people at high school. I just didn't know how it would translate. And Coach Knoche and I talked about this on the podcast as well, but Tim did great. So what was it like playing with Tim? And tell us a little bit about your career there, and also playing with Coach Knoche.
Yes, I'll start with Tim first. So I met Tim when I was rising ninth grade at Randolph-Macon team camp. So Tim was probably 6'3" or 6'4" size, 16 or 17 shoe, and kind of the goofy kid. But every year Tim got better, right? Like every year now Tim's banging inside, and he's getting the rebounds and he's putting it back in. Next year Tim's stepping out, hitting the jump shot, from 12 feet. And so I kind of had a front row seat, to Tim's kind of evolution as a basketball player. The Kenner League, by the time Tim was a sophomore, he was killing people in the Kenner League.
Is that right?
Georgetown guys, Maryland, it didn't matter. Tim was stepping out, shooting 3 from 23 feet, NBA range. So his game developed tremendously. It even shocked me. I'm sure to some extent it probably shocked him, but Tim was a hard worker. He just kept working and he kept getting better. So credit to Tim. I mean, unfortunately, he had an injury in his junior year that slowed him down a little bit when he fractured his kneecap. But he was a first team all conference player as a junior or as a sophomore or junior. I forget which one. But yeah, I've seen the goofy Tim all the way to Tim that just dominates the game. And Tim, once he got to that point where he was good, Tim didn't hesitate to let those people know who made fun of him, come get some of this now, right? Like that was the mentality Tim had, because he wasn't always the star, right? He was sometimes, the guy that people were making fun of and saying he can't play. And so when he got better, that confidence level was high, and he got that from his mom. His mom was loud and boisterous, and so Tim is just like, he's loud like his mom. She was probably the fan favorite at the Kenner League. I don't know if you ever went to any of those games, but everybody knew Tim's mom. Right?
I saw her at Chantilly. I saw her at Chantilly.
Jim was quiet, and she's yelling. She calls him Fred for some reason. She used to call him Fred. Pass the ball, Fred. Stop shooting, Fred. Yeah, she'd be yelling at other players, telling them, you're 0 for 15, pass the ball, So, and that's Tim. That's where Tim gets it from. But, both of them, both loud. They're in the building. Whenever they walk in the room, they know they're there. But at the same time, both of them would give you the shirt off their back, right? So I kind of know the soft side of Tim, and I know the side of Tim that most people get to see is kind of that loud, Tim Fudd, right? But a heck of a player and had a great career.
He did.
I would say just in terms of our time at American, we always struggle at the beginning of the season because we, I guess you call them pay the bills games, right? Where you go play the big college team, Maryland, whoever it is, and you get a check in exchange, and you come back home with a 20-point loss. So we kind of always got off to a tough start because we had a tough schedule the first 5 or 6 games. But I always felt that we were very competitive in our conference, right? We were always middle of the pack. Our senior season, we were first place, up until last 4 games of the season. So I always felt like we were a competitive team within the conference, and I always felt like every year we had an opportunity to win the conference championship and potentially go, on to the NCAA tournament because our conference had an automatic bid. So yeah, it's frustrating. We didn't win like high school. And it's hard to go from winning a lot in high school to not winning as much in college. But as Dereck said, there were a lot of life lessons learned from that experience, not giving up, you keep fighting, learning how to work with teammates from all different types of backgrounds coming from all across the country, learning how to come together. And we had good times. We had a lot of fun on the road. I think we genuinely liked each other. But, wish we could have gotten, Coach Knoche a couple of more wins. We lost some key recruits that would have been game changers for us in the program, just kind of slipped away. But overall, it was a great experience, and I wouldn't change anything about it. As far as Coach Knoche, he was a player's coach, right? Like, and Naki's got probably one of the biggest vocabularies of anybody out there, right? I mean, the guy would say words, and we didn't have Google at the time, but we'd be back in the locker room, like, what did he say? I mean, what did that word mean? So, great coach. We used to play against him and Gordo in 2-on-2 all the time. They'd want to play us 2-on-2 after practice. They both could still play at the time. But he was fun to play for. Like I said, I wish I could have played more consistently and helped give him, a few more wins during his time at American.
Well, let's talk a little bit. And Darryl, you can go first. You've had a great career, post basketball career, a lawyer. Tell us a little about how basketball propelled you into doing wonderful things, and maybe a little bit about what you're up to now.
Yes, I mean, I think basketball, a lot of things. I think I just mentioned some of them. Being accountable to something other than yourself, right? With the team, right? You're accountable to the rest of the players on the team. You're part of a team effort, and you have to do your part to make sure that the team moves forward. And that comes into play in a lot of the things that I do, work-wise now. So also the not giving up. Like I said, at American, I felt every year that started, we were going to have a better team that year. We were going to keep working, and we were going to get better. We're going to have a better, win-loss record. And so just kind of having that resilience to kind of push through tough times and difficult times and not give up. And then lastly, my job and profession, you got to be able to get along with people from all types of backgrounds and be able to work with people that you might not necessarily agree with on a lot of different issues, whether it be political or otherwise. And so, college, when we had people coming from West Virginia, New York City, Missouri, and it's interesting when you bring all those people together, in the locker room, we didn't really care what color you were or where you were from or if you were Republican or Democrat, right? We got along once we were on the court. And so kind of bring that into play, my work life in terms of just building relationships with people that come from different backgrounds, have different views, kind of come together, create that team atmosphere where you can work together for one common goal. And so a lot of those things I got from basketball. And so I really value those experiences that I had and the opportunities that I had to play with people from different backgrounds and play for coaches that were different. And so, those would be the main things I would say in terms of what I've taken from basketball. And then the one thing I would say is basketball was probably one of the only things, and I'm still chasing it right now. And that's to be present in the moment, right? Like basketball to me was probably one of the few things where when I got on the basketball court for 2 hours, I didn't think about anything else. I didn't think about the exam the next morning. I didn't think about something that was stressing me out. That was like my free space, right? For 2 hours locked in. I haven't been able to match that since I stopped playing basketball. Dereck and I played pickup. I don't know it's called the Legends League. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Julian, out in Fairfax County, pretty competitive league. And I stopped playing once COVID hit. Realized the only thing left to do was get hurt, at least for me. But even with the pickup basketball, it's the first time that he and I had a chance to play together. I'm in my early 40s, he's in his late 30s. But again, it was one of the few times where it was a good breakaway for me. It was still present. Once the pickup game started, didn't think about work, didn't think about any of the chores I had to do at home. I was locked in, and so that was a great thing for basketball. And I'm still working on that, how to be present in the moment.
That's actually a great point about that. I was a big fan of the state tournament, not because I ever played there, because my team they were very good. I wasn't a good player like you guys, even though I was okay. But I used to love going to the state tournament because you have the game, you have the players, all this emotion, you have the crowd, that everyone was into it. No matter what was going on in the world, when you go to the state tournament, all that mattered was who was going to win that game, what was going on in the court. It was always a great moment because nothing else mattered. You'd have a team from Southwest Virginia, and there might be a poor area of the country. You might have a team from Northern Virginia, a wealthy area. But it doesn't matter. When we're in that stadium cheering for our team, nothing else mattered except for that game. And you're right. Very few things can match that you could just be present in that moment and nothing else matters. So anyway, so Dereck, why don't you go next? And also, why don't you weave? So I reconnected with high school basketball. I've been gone since 2005. That's when I stopped officiating and coaching. And because my kids play soccer and other things, I never got into it. I kind of got back in with this Nova Legends thing and doing podcasts. So I started going to games. One of the first players that caught my eye was Miles Franklin. Now, I had no idea he was a Franklin. I guess I should have assumed it because there's so many Franklins that play basketball. But the kid didn't. He was a different shape. He was a long player, and he just didn't. I would never have thought he was related to you guys. And he's a sophomore. He's got a beautiful shot. I like the way he moves, and he's going to be a great prospect. So also, Dereck, when you talk about lessons learned from basketball and how it affects your life, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're trying to impart those lessons on Dereck or maybe other kids that you may mentor.
Yeah. So with like all of my kids and stuff like that, but especially with Miles, it's from the beginning, it's all the kids have kind of been treated differently. It's interesting. When I started having kids, I kind of just imagined that they would all be a certain way. They'd all have certain things. And what I found is that they've all had different paths of development, Miles might not like me saying this, but there was a period of time when he was younger, I was like, man, basketball might not be a sport for you. And it was one of those things where he had the athleticism and he had the skill, but sometimes, like, for example, he wasn't a really good shooter. And it's funny to hear you say that he has like a beautiful shot. He wasn't necessarily a good shooter at the beginning. And, but he always played hard. He was always like, I remember, like, they say he's the Iron Man because he's always diving after basketballs. He's on the ground. He's going after the ball. So he was always like really competitive and played really hard. But some of those other things are things that he had to work on. And one of the things that he's always been really good at is taking instruction and then actually applying it. And sometimes it's those intangibles that you don't really see, like on the basketball court, and you don't necessarily know how much work and how much attention to detail somebody has to kind of exhibit to be able to be where they are and do the things that they're doing. There's some people that just have a lot of natural skill where they just picked it up and they were just able to play, and I think I was kind of like that. So I imagine my kids would be, but he really had to work at it a little bit more, I think, and he's always been a late bloomer. So I think he still has some development in him, and like he's always been a little bit behind development and just development wise, physically, and also skill wise. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh, I didn't know he could do that, or oh, that's something new. I hadn't seen that before, and it's always a surprise, So I'm really excited to see where his career goes. But at a young age, he's probably the one that taught me it's you can't really assess what a 8-year-old's going to be. You can't assess what a 10-year-old's going to be. It's sometimes you may see it. I imagine like maybe a player like LeBron James, you can probably see it from when he was really young. You have this guy, he's bigger than everybody, he's faster than everybody, he can jump higher than everybody, he can dribble better than everybody. So you're like, oh, this guy's probably going to be pretty good. But there's only one of those. So everybody else is kind of a development phase where you can't really say what somebody's potential is just by looking at them. You got to let them develop, focus on fundamentals. So that's one of the things that I focus on. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old, but I think like nowadays it's a lot more focus on winning than there is on fundamentals and how to play. So you see a lot of systems, even at really young ages, where you're running a system and you're doing all these things where kids run a motion and they're doing the same thing over and over again. And sometimes I feel like they don't necessarily have the fundamentals that I remember learning. And like, there's a lot less focus on that. So whenever I was coaching youngsters, I don't really head coach that much. I'm mostly an assistant now because I don't like coaching games because I take it a little bit too seriously and I take losses a little bit too hard. So I was like, maybe I should be an assistant coach. But one of the things I always try to focus on is like just fundamentals. It's you can apply them to any system, you can apply them to anything. Once you have those fundamentals down pat, it's something that you can repeat over and over and over again. You can always go back to it. And I tell Miles, you only need 3 moves. Maybe you can get away with 2. But if you can go to those every single time, and you can go to those when in crunch times, when there's a lot of pressure, if you can go to that same move, it probably won't matter as long as you practice it and you're really confident in it. It might not even matter who's guarding you because you can always go to that. You can always get a good shot up, or you can always get a good opportunity for one of your teammates to be able to penetrate. So that's one of the things I've tried to instill in my kids is don't just go out and just shoot and just jog after the ball. Go out there with a plan. I'm going to shoot 20 elbow jumpers, and I'm going to shoot 100 threes today, and I'm going to work on my UTEP 2-step, or I'm going to work on this Kyrie move I saw the other day, or I'm going to work on something Steph Curry step back that I saw the other day, and I'm going to do it 50 times, and do it 50 times. And that's the hard thing, I think, for kids and kids that are trying to develop and play nowadays. Greatness can sometimes be very boring and monotonous. You practice the same move 50 times. And it's not easy. You do it 20 times, you're like, I want to do something else now. I want to practice this move. I want to do this and I want to do that. But if you have that determination and you can stick to it, I think a lot of times that's much better than going out there for an hour and doing 100 different things. It's better probably to go out there for 30 minutes and do 3 things and work on 3 things and work on those things consistently. So, that's kind of my kind of mentality towards it, and how I try to help my kids develop in sports, and whatever the sport may be.
You should patent that. Greatness is boring. I've never heard that. That could be Greatness is Boring by Derek Franklin. So, well, guys, people tell me that I know everybody, especially in the basketball world, because I've played, coached, officiated, done everything except for really be a parent of a basketball player. But I have never met you guys before, and I've always admired you from afar. Great players I always wish I could be. I had the desire you guys had, and maybe had the speed you guys had, but nothing else. Couldn't shoot, couldn't handle it. You guys had such great games. It was a joy to watch you guys play and compete, and now succeed like you guys have. I don't know if you guys had any final thoughts you wanted to share, but I really appreciate you guys coming on. If you're going to do a Nova Legends podcast series, you got to have you guys on board. You guys are a very important part of the Northern Virginia basketball story. So I really appreciate you coming on. I don't know if you guys wanted to, have any final thoughts. Darryl, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, first of all, I want to say thank you for having us on. This has been great. I mean, it's I always love the opportunity to reminisce about those high school days in Northern Virginia. There was such great talent out there. I mean, I think my last tour, my sophomore year through my junior year, I think probably 10 plus kids in just the Great Falls district played Division I basketball, right? So it was, there was a lot of talent out there. There's a lot of good memories. And so, I mean, I think it's great that you put this podcast together.
Thanks.
To give people an opportunity to get up on the podcast and talk about their experiences. For me, the greatest thing has been to just watch other people I used to compete against. As I said earlier, getting a chance to see them, haven't seen them in 25 years. And most importantly, it's great to see the guys you competed against doing well in life. So thanks again for giving us this platform to be able to get up here and speak and reminisce about the good old days.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks again for participating. Dereck, did you want to say something, Dereck?
Oh yeah. Well, one thing that you said made me laugh is you say you might have the speed of us. You might have had my speed, but I don't know if you had Daryl's speed. That dude.
No.
Was
I shouldn't even mention myself with you guys.
No, this is
you guys got to bear with. You got to bear with me. I got to hold on.
I think Darryl could have been an NFL defensive back, man. He was fast. But yeah, so I really appreciate this. I think the first one I saw was my old teammate that I mentioned earlier, Michael Desmond, who's coaching out of South Lakes. He sent me something where I think you had a coaches panel and you were talking to the Hayfield coach, and I think Doug Yule was there and some other coaches in the northern region. So, and he showed me, and you had mentioned Miles, so he was showing me that, and I've watched some other ones, and so yeah, I think it's good to be able to look back and and see things that people I remember watching as a kid, when I was watching Darryl and Duane play and seeing them talk about it and just kind of reminisce on the memories that I had. It's something. This has really brought it back for me, and it actually brings a little bit of happiness to know that that time and place is not forgotten in this internet age where everything seems to be what happened last week. So yeah, I appreciate you doing this, and I know it probably takes a lot of effort. So and I don't know how much fanfare you get, but yeah, just to let you know I'm a fan. So hopefully we're able to keep doing it, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, well, thanks for that kind words. It's been fun, and not just me, because the one thing that's been it's made it so successful is all the buy-in by the great players and the great coaches. Like, I mean, Red Jenkins is one of the first guys to really get involved. And once you get the big players involved, like Pete Holbert was involved. He might be a little bit older. You guys might not remember Pete, but he was a great player. University of Maryland is where he played college. But once you get the great players on board, everyone wants to participate. So it's even though I'm the one that spends a lot of time with the podcast and stuff, it's basically, we're putting together history that belongs to all of us. So, so again, I appreciate the kind words, and I've definitely,
thank you.
I love doing it. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, I love to meet in person sometime. I think I've seen Dereck at games before. Next time I'll stop in and say hi. I never like to bother people when they're in that zone. And Dereck sounds like he's a competitive dad, but but hopefully I'll see you guys.
When I'm playing, not when I'm watching. I was like, that's too much stress. I try to stay even keel when I'm watching them play. I don't talk about it.
Exactly right. It's hard when you watch people play. It's easier just to go out there and play yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, guys. Again, I really enjoyed it. Let's keep in touch.
Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks again for participating.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, guys.